The San Antonio Spurs have long been considered one of the most stable and successful franchises in NBA history. With 5 championships under their belt and a legacy of consistency, many fans admire them, but others can't help but wonder, how did the league ever let them become this good in the first place? A franchise that never seems to collapse, always rebounds faster than expected, and somehow lands generational talents at just the right moment. It almost feels unfair. Let's unpack how the Spurs became the NBA's greatest quiet dynasty, and why the league might regret not doing more to stop it. The origin: a perfect storm named Tim Duncan. In 1997, the Spurs pulled off one of the greatest pivot moves in sports history. After years of competitiveness behind David Robinson, a sudden injury-plagued season tanked their record. It seemed like a lost year. But it wasn't. That 1996-97 collapse earned them the number 1 pick in the 1997 NBA draft. Entered Tim Duncan, a generational big man from Wake Forest with the demeanor of a monk and the skills of a cyborg. Duncan instantly transformed the franchise. Paired with Robinson in the Twin Towers era, Duncan helped the Spurs win their first title in 1999. And that was only the beginning. Over the next 2 decades, the Spurs would go on to win titles in 2003, 2005, 2007, and 2014. Duncan wasn't flashy. He wasn't marketable in the way the NBA prefers. But he was dominant. And once the Spurs had him, everything else fell into place. The dynasty blueprint: Popovich and the culture factor. The NBA is a league of stars, but the Spurs were also a triumph of system and culture. Head coach Greg Popovich, who took over during the 1996-97 season, built a system around humility, ball movement, defense, and smart basketball. Unlike super teams formed via free agency, the Spurs built from within. They drafted incredibly well, developed their players, and found hidden gems overseas. Manu Ginobili, a second-round pick from Argentina, and Tony Parker, a late first-rounder from France, became international icons and key cogs in the dynasty. The Spurs operated differently. They didn't chase headlines. They avoided drama. While teams like the Lakers, Knicks, or Nets often dominated media cycles, the Spurs quietly dominated the court. This is where the question starts to arise: should the league have done something to prevent this level of structural perfection from becoming the norm for so long? The NBA's market dilemma. One of the NBA's ongoing challenges is maintaining competitiveness while promoting big market success. The league thrives when teams in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago are good. But the Spurs, from the modest city of San Antonio, defied that logic. They weren't supposed to be this successful. Small markets rarely dominate for this long. But the Spurs did, and they did it without ever hitting rock bottom. In fact, from 1997 to 2019, they made the playoffs 22 straight times, the longest streak in NBA history. This was no fluke. It was calculated brilliance. And from a league marketing standpoint, it may have been a nightmare. TV ratings often dipped when the Spurs were in the finals. They didn't sell drama, they sold wins. Then came the restart: Wembanyama. After a brief dip post-Duncan, it seemed like the Spurs might finally enter a long rebuild. Kawhi Leonard, their next great hope, forced his way out. The team struggled, but just as they were trending toward irrelevance, they landed Victor Wembanyama, another number 1 overall pick, another generational big man, another league-altering talent, this time from France, billed as the greatest prospect since LeBron James. And just like that, the Spurs might be back. Once again, the franchise didn't trade half-its roster for stars. They didn't beg players to form a superteam. They just patiently built their culture, made smart moves, and let the lottery ping-pong balls bounce their way. If Wembanyama becomes what he's expected to, then the Spurs, incredibly, may be setting up another 15-year run of dominance. The league's missed opportunity. So, should the NBA have stopped the Spurs? Of course, they can't rig results. But what the Spurs expose is a gap in how the league balances parity, market value, and long-term competitiveness. While other teams gamble and rebuild through chaos, the Spurs perfected the art of the soft reset. They don't tank for a decade like the Kings once did. They don't become a soap opera like the Nets or Clippers. They just reset, retool, and relaunch. In hindsight, maybe the league should have put more emphasis on ensuring teams like San Antonio couldn't game the lottery and maintain elite coaching, elite scouting, and elite culture simultaneously. Because when they get everything right, like they did in the late 90s, and might again now, they become nearly unbeatable. And they do it with terrifying calm. Final thoughts: respect, resentment, and realization. Whether you love them or hate them, you have to respect what the Spurs built, and are building again. But that doesn't mean it's fun for everyone else. If Wembanyama turns out to be another Duncan, and Popovich passes the baton to a worthy successor, San Antonio could very well become a dynasty again. So yeah, maybe the league should have never let the Spurs get this good. Too late now.